there was many things that happened in the course of making the film that made it, you know, the fact that so many of the choices were fortuitous, even though we couldn't have known that. For example, during the course of pre-production, one of Mel's lawyers was also Dustin Hoffman's lawyer. He wanted to play the Elephant Man, John Merrick. That was brought to my attention. Mel says, "What do you think? You know, we can get Dustin Hoffman and be really good." And I know my heart sunk a little bit for a variety of reasons. One was I felt I'm going to lose control of this movie if Dustin Hoffman is going to be the star of it. I did think that, because I thought, you know, he's a major actor. It's going to be a whole different kind of a thing. It changes the nature of things when you get people like that involved. They have entourages. They have other people. He'll want to name who the director is. He may have a problem with David, although Mel said, no, David's doing it. So he's got to go along with David. That was the one thing. And I didn't know Mel well enough to know that he would have supported me, I think, anyway. But that was only one reason. The bigger reason for me was that you would always be looking at Dustin Hoffman and trying to see where Dustin Hoffman ended and the makeup began. You'd always be thinking of it as a makeup on a face that we all know. And that was not, to me, what the nature of the movie should be. And I convinced Mel, if he needed convincing, he may have agreed with me, but if he hadn't, he agreed with me when I finished. He said, "Yeah, I think you're probably right. That's a character that should not be somebody we know and we've seen and we're so sure about." And the movie that totally convinced me that that was the right choice, not that I needed another movie to convince me, was when Kenneth Branagh did Frankenstein, and Frankenstein was Robert De Niro. And I never, ever could forget that I was looking at Robert De Niro with a shaved head and funny scars, but it was always Robert De Niro. It was never Frankenstein. So that to me was the nature of what we were facing at that time. And so I basically said my piece. Mel agreed with it. And a friend of mine in London who I had met said, "You ought to see this movie, The Naked Civil Servant," which was about Quentin Crisp, this gay icon in England at the time, and it's played by John Hurt. And we brought it in. We all saw it, Mel, myself, David, and Chris and Eric. And we watched it I think on television there, and we got a tape of it, and we thought John Hurt was fantastic. So we said, what about him? Maybe he's a good guy. I mean, we were thinking of other people. David wanted to originally use the guy he used in Eraserhead, Jack Nance. But Jack Nance, while he was an interesting guy, didn't have the acting chops, at least that we all thought could pull it off the way, and didn't have the sympathetic look that, I don't know, we just made a decision that we put that on hold. We said, let's take a look at John Hurt. And Academy Awards came up. He was up for supporting actor in Midnight Express. And when the awards came up, he had to be in LA. And during that period, we had contacted his manager and asked if he would come into Mel's office. And Mel had an office at 20th Century Fox. And the first thing we did was we took these photographs of the original, the real Elephant Man that were taken back in the 1890s, 80s, 90s, and we blew them up to wall size, big blow-ups. We had like 3 of them. And we put them on the wall inside Mel's office, facing the chair where John would be sitting when we brought him in. But we didn't say anything. And he knew he was coming in to talk about a movie that we were doing, didn't know too much about it. It was just David and me, John's manager, a fellow by the name of John Crosby, and Mel. He comes in, and it's the week of the Academy Awards. Academy Awards haven't happened yet. He comes in. Mel takes over the conversation. We all introduced ourselves. Mel says, "So John, I hear you're in this movie, Midnight Express. Good movie, and you're up for a supporting actor." He says, "You're probably not going to win." He says, "But it was a great performance. But there are a lot of good performances around." And meantime, John is looking over at the wall, seeing what the fuck is that, seeing these pictures. And Mel just goes on and on. He says, "Well, let me tell you a little bit about this story. It's a story about, and he begins telling John a little bit about the project. And within minutes, he says, "You see those pictures over there? Those are real photographs of the real man. That's his back, that's his face, that's him, that's the guy. We want you to play him." And we think, and this is the movie where you'll win your Academy Award. David and I are like literally shitting in our pants. We're sitting in the seat saying, "Oh shit, is this guy gonna take this or not?" And John's manager jumps in and says, "It sounds great, sounds really interesting. John and I need to talk. We're gonna, we're in town for a few days. We'll give you a call, and we'll tell you." And and John Hurt looks at his manager and says, "John," he says, "just shut up." He says, "I want to play this guy." He says, right in the room. He said, I want to play this guy. So we says, "Well, great. That's terrific." So, you could see the manager like, "Oh, I have just lost my negotiating ability completely."